Take my puppy, sir. We haven't eaten in 3 days. What the writers did changed everything forever. Dawn over Maple Street looks scraped thin, the neon of Joe's diner stuttering like a heartbeat that might quit. Emma, 7, stands at the edge of the lot, in a hoodie 2 sizes small, one hand white-knuckled around a braided rope leash. Max, her terrier, presses to her shin, shivering hard enough that his tag taps glass against metal, and then goes still. Engines idle, leather creaks, a rider steps out. Ethan, road-scarred, calm in his eyes, the steadiness of a man who has starved before. Take my puppy, sir. We haven't eaten in 3 days. The words leave frost in the air. I can't let Max die because we're poor. She doesn't cry this time. She already did. She just holds the leash like a bridge about to collapse. Ethan crouches so they breathe the same cold. What's your name? Emma. And his? Max. He nods once, gaze moving from chewed rope to matted fur, to knees peeking from worn denim. The diner window frames coffee steam and faces pretending not to watch. Somewhere a fork drops, loud as a bell. Emma's sleeve slips, showing a loose plastic wristband, with hospital print worn nearly blank. In her other fist, a sheet folded to exhaustion. Max noses it. Then her wrist, then Ethan's glove, as if urging a choice. What's on the paper? He asks. Silence. She angles it toward him without letting go. He sees 3 lines, a name he recognizes, a date circled twice, a number that isn't a bill. His jaw locks. The bikes behind him settle into a low thunder. Emma, he asks. Quieter. Who should be feeding you? She swallows, looks down at Max, and answers with a truth that rethreads every sound on the street, even the neon hum. What happened next will shock you. Morning light slips through thin curtains in the modest apartment above Maple Street, laying a band of gold across a scarred table where old syrup rings shine like coins. Emma traces one with a crayon, while Max naps on her sock, one ear folded, whiskers twitching. Clara flips waffles in a dented iron and hums a tune that sounds like safe footsteps returning. James ties his bootlaces and pretends not to notice how Max watches the pan, tail-tapping hope against the linoleum. When plates arrive, Emma pushes the first bite toward the floor. Max considers manners, then accepts the treaty with a soft grunt. The room smells of batter and coffee, and the faint lemon of last night's cleaning. A small world holding steady above a street that never runs out of stories. Sundays belong to ritual. After breakfast, James lifts Emma once and spins her carefully under the low lamp. Clara warns him, then laughs when the shade sways and settles. Board games follow. Tokens march across cardboard streets, while James imagines odd neighbors for every square. Clara keeps score with the theater that softens at Emma's pouts. Max patrols, snuffles baseboards, then curls at Emma's feet, proud to be the final piece that makes the picture complete. Fridays bring a ceremony. James comes home from the plant smelling of machine oil and wind, a paper bag of day-old donuts tucked beneath his arm like contraband. Clara steals a powdered ring and dusts Emma's nose. Emma squeals. Max sneezes and looks offended. Music breathes from a radio that catches only 2 stations. Hallway air gathers garlic and beans from other kitchens, turning the building into a slow parade of dinners. The family files the week away and savors a pocket of peace that money never buys directly, but sometimes allows when nothing else breaks. Workdays demand steadiness. Clara cleans offices on Main before sunrise, the key ring tapping her thigh with each lock. She moves with practiced rhythm. Spray, wipe, empty, reset. A choreography learned without applause. James stands at the line where metal meets purpose, feeding parts to a conveyor that carries them toward machines he will never use. He loves explaining torque and threads, and why a bolt seated right can silence a rattle no one else can find. On good evenings, he shows Emma how wrenches are cousins with different tempers and tells her that fixing things is a language anyone can learn by listening. Routine holds the walls up. Bills meet envelopes. Envelopes meet stamps. Stamps meet the lobby slot. Shoes get patched. Knees get patches too. A neighbor teaches Clara to hem and refuses payment beyond a wedge of waffle. Another neighbor lends a socket wrench when one goes missing and asks no questions. Maple Street stays small in the best way, a place where people carry each other an inch without making speeches. Change arrives as a cough that will not leave. James blames dust, weather, the way spring tilts between warm and raw. The cough deepens, then doubles him over until breath shreds. Clara brings him to the clinic, where a nurse frowns kindly and orders tests. James squeezes Emma's hand and jokes about doctors who speak in words longer than buses. She laughs because he needs that laugh. The results take too long, and silence starts to bite. The call comes on a Thursday while Clara scrubs a stairwell 3 buildings away. The voice on the line is careful and heavy. Aggressive leukemia, immediate treatment, costs, options, urgency, threads every syllable like wire. Clara presses her forehead to the cool wall, and follows the damp track her sponge leaves until the pattern becomes prey. She writes numbers she barely sees and steps outside into a noon that feels darker than evening. That night, the 3 of them sit at the table and face the thing by naming it. James explains as simply as he can, giving the illness a label without letting it own the room. Emma tucks her toes into Max's fur and reads the fear in her mother's eyes before she grasps the stakes. Clara pours tea and forgets to drink it. They make a plan because plans make air feel solid. James will start chemotherapy. Clara will ask for extra shifts and call cousins for small loans. Emma will keep school steady and feed Max before arguments can begin. They agree to guard joy where it still lives, even if it must arrive in smaller portions. Treatment begins with bright lights, long chairs and nurses who learn names quickly. James turns pain into smaller shapes by telling stories to other patients. When Emma visits, he hides the worst of it. Clara spends hours with forms that multiply. Offices place her on hold and play the same instrumental loop until it feels like a dare. She tracks every dollar in a small notebook that becomes a shield. She learns a voice that is courteous and unyielding at once, the voice of someone who has no time to apologize for existing. Paychecks shrink as James misses hours, then stop when his strength collapses. Clara works dawn to dusk. Her hands are split from chemicals, so she tapes them before lifting another bag. She naps on buses and stands up one stop early to avoid drifting past home. Emma becomes a quiet helper, lining pills in neat rows, setting mugs by the kettle, pairing socks, taping a drawing of a sturdy tree near the bed, so her father can look at something that stands through the weather. She learns to braid Max's leash so it will not fray. Max learns to wait longer between bowls without complaint, and presses his warm side to James's shin during long afternoons. Bills begin to outnumber envelopes. Red letters arrive with language that bites even when polite. Clara sells a thin bracelet her grandmother wore on a long-ago wedding day, and tucks the story into a box of memories she will not open at night. She starts walking to work to save fare, lacing her shoes while the building sleeps. Most mornings the neon from Joe's diner paints a pink stripe across wet pavement, and she steps over it like a border between before and after. She takes extra buildings, cleans an extra floor, and learns every stain's name. The apartment tightens as if breath were a luxury. Joy still visits, only quieter. Waffles go from stacks to halves to quarters, but Sunday keeps its name because names matter. Friday games compress into single rounds when fatigue drops across the table like a winter coat, yet even one roll invites laughter that cracks grief's shell. The radio trades melody for static. Neighbors leave groceries by the door and pretend they came from nowhere, so pride can stand. In the evenings, Clara rubs James's forearms to wake circulation while Emma reads aloud from a book about a girl who learns maps by heart. Max sighs with his whole body and surrenders to whatever comfort he can provide. School gives Emma structure, though her teacher notices how she pets an invisible dog under the desk and stares through the window as if someone she loves is walking by. Every afternoon Max waits at the door with priestly patience. The 2 of them walk to the corner store where $3 buy bread and a dented can of soup. When no one watches, the cashier adds an apple. Emma does not mention it because gratitude sometimes grows better in silence. She feeds Max first, 1 bite for him, 1 for herself, then closes her eyes and imagines summer at the park they plan to visit when the envelope is filled. Spring limps forward, buds push at branches, rain needles the windows, wind rides the alley where flyers chase each other until corners round. James's hair thins, his face glows with a fragile brightness that scares Emma more than anger would. Clara learns to read lab numbers like weather, scanning for clear skies that stay brief and counting storms that do not. She marks appointments on a calendar with squares that look like chess moves. Some nights she sits awake to hear James breathe and counts beats. The slope stays merciless. Rent edges upward. Insurance denies claims. The letter ending James's job looks ordinary. A rectangle with a logo and dates, language that pretends neutrality while slipping a blade. He reads it again in case mercy hides between lines. Poor performance, it claims, listing missed quotas and late arrivals that began only after chemo. Across the desk, Victor Hensley watches with clean hands and a practiced frown. Insurance falls away with the job, not immediately, but soon enough to feel designed. HR slides a packet across the table, the cost of continuation circled in yellow like a warning flare. Numbers climb past rent and groceries. James nods so his knees do not betray him. Outside, wind pushes grit across the lot. Clara hears the news before he reaches the apartment. Because the building carries grief fast, she steadies him, sets water on the table, and reads the letter without blinking. Her jaw finds new angles, the ones women grow when they realize no one is coming to fix this. Behind the words, she sees metrics engineered to fail a patient, and a man paid to call the trap policy. She files the letter by date, and smooths the page. 2 days later, a notice appears on their door, adhesive strong enough to rip paint. Ronald Tate, who once let late fees slide when a bus stranded half a block, announces a 40% rent increase for upgrades. No schedule, no plan, only a number and a deadline. The hall smells faintly of fresh paint, yet no unit changes. Clara walks the stairwell and counts new smoke alarms. None. What arrives instead of improvement is a strategy. Tenants get surprise inspections. Fees bloom for keys no one received. A neighbor returns from a night shift to find a lock changed by accident, and a couch rained on at the curb. Ronald patrols with a clipboard and a smile that never reaches his eyes. He repeats phrases like market alignment and necessary adjustments. Notices multiply as if the building learned to grow paper. Clara tries to reason. She visits the office with the soft voice she used for raising requests, and the firm tone she learned from denial letters. Ronald nods, says he empathizes, and recommends downsizing before things escalate. She answers with receipts and lease clauses. He shrugs and taps a framed certification that proves only that someone laminated something. A maintenance worker she trusts whispers that a new buyer for several units has begun listing short-term rentals. That night, Clara opens the old laptop and learns county records do not lie. She searches deeds, LLC filings, and tenant cases. The same attorney who drafted factory terminations files eviction papers on Maple Street. She finds fundraiser photos where Victor Hensley and Ronald Tate stand shoulder to shoulder with a ribbon between them. A church bulletin lists them as cousins. She prints pages, underlines addresses and circles a phone number appearing on both filings and lease. James wants coincidence. Because suspicion costs energy he saves for breath, yet patterns stack. His appeal gets denied with metrics that began after his first infusion. Flyers appear promising, modernization funded by increased revenue streams. A euphemism with teeth. A couple upstairs receives an eviction notice for failing to report a guest who stayed one weekend when a boiler failed. Meanwhile, a short-term rental listing for their building gains reviews. Money thins into a string. They sell the table to a neighbor and eat on the floor like camp. Clara lifts their couch and watches a stranger carry it out with gentle hands. She wraps her mother's heirloom necklace in tissue and walks to a shop that trades memory for cash. The owner offers less than fair. She accepts anyway, and thanks him because dignity sometimes requires sentences that taste like iron. Victor escalates with letters that sound helpful while carving warning grooves. He advises James to avoid unfounded allegations online, then forwards a performance log unsigned by any supervisor. Clara calls a workers' rights clinic and waits through transfers to reach a volunteer who knows this story by heart. The counselor names the scheme without drama. Cut the employee, lose the insurance, time the exit to minimize risk, and let a partner landlord press the rest. Ronald turns subtle pressure into open aggression. Cold notices go up at sundown. The emergency line routes to a voicemail made. A mother with twins pays in person and receives a receipt that vanishes a week later, replaced by a demand for arrears. A veteran down the hall gets accused of harboring an unauthorized pet because his granddaughter visits with a fish. People start photographing doors before leaving for work. Losing the game of proof means a sidewalk life. Emma watches adults talk in codes they do not realize they are using. She hears her mother count coins with a rhythm that once belonged to jump rope. She learns to fold laundry so carefully that the cloth feels respect. Max shadows her, pressing his weight against her leg whenever a thick envelope slides under the door. When the refrigerator dies, a contractor knocks within an hour, offering a payment plan that would lock them in until the building sells. Clara says they will manage a cooler and the cousins pose for cameras during charity drives, hand oversized checks to organizations with glossy newsletters, and thank sponsors by name. They rename exploitation philanthropy and count on the city to clap. Clara tapes the photos inside a folder labeled Maple Street. She lists dates and every sentence that sounded like empathy but functioned like leverage. She imagines a courtroom where paper refuses to smile back. At dinner, now soup and toast if the store has a sale, Emma asks why men with houses make families sleep in cars. Clara answers with honesty wrapped in hope. Some people build ladders by stealing rungs. Others bring lumber. She promises they will find builders and teaches Emma to log every notice, every visit, every number that matters. James adds names and quotes to a notebook with lines straight as anger. He wants a record that can walk into rooms he cannot reach. Night sharpens resolve. Clara studies tenant law, learns which codes apply, and maps a path through agencies that the cousins count on people to fear. She copies documents twice and leaves one bundle with a neighbor who organizes church drives. She sits with an elder and records stories of locks turned at dusk. She reaches out to legal aid and sends scans with subject lines that do not hide what is at stake. If you think exploiting sick families is wrong, comment justice now to stand with Emma. The sentence rises from Clara's chest not as theater but as an invitation. She will gather witnesses, hunt patterns and refuse silence. The machine that hurt them runs on people keeping quiet. She chooses noise. Morning returns with sharpened air. Clara kisses Emma's hair, squeezes James's hand and tucks the folder into a bag she will not let out of sight. On Maple Street, neon from Joe's Diner paints a thin line across wet pavement, like a promise she intends to collect. Somewhere, two men with bloodlines will feel a shift they cannot name. Soon, they leave the apartment before dawn, quiet as people sneaking past a sleeping animal that once belonged to them. Clara locks the door and pockets the key she cannot return, then presses it into James's palm, as if weight could stand in for shelter. The hallway smells of bleach and garlic. Emma carries the leash while Max presses close, claws ticking on steps that remember their feet. Outside, Maple Street looks washed thin. The neon from Joe's Diner draws a pink bar across the wet asphalt and hums above the hush. They load the battered sedan with a basket of clothes, a kettle, 2 bowls, and a shoebox of treasures Emma refuses to abandon. Clara's folder of documents slides under the passenger seat, where she can reach it fast. The door shuts on the last of their old air. By noon, the ring sits on Clara's palm, like a small sun she can no longer afford to orbit. The pawn shop near the bus depot displays watches that outlived wrists and frames filled with strangers who needed cash yesterday. The clerk is gentle in a professional way. He weighs the gold, names a number that stings, and waits for outrage. She nods, accepts the envelope, and thanks him because anger will not buy dinner. On the sidewalk, she presses the pale groove left by years of wearing and breathes, until her hands stop shaking. She walks back to the car, opens the envelope, counts twice, and smiles at Emma as if arithmetic could turn paper into bread. The sedan becomes a narrow house. The back seat is a bedroom. The front seat is a kitchen. The trunk is a closet that smells of soap and metal. Emma tapes a paper star to the ceiling fabric and calls it a nightlight. Max curls into the curve behind her knees and keeps watch with one open eye. James doles pills at exact hours and leans his temple against the window during waves of nausea, counting breaths and streetlights. Clara rations fuel and the temptation to drive nowhere at all. When the engine idles, the heater threatens to comfort and the gauge warns against kindness. They learn the geometry of small spaces and how to pass a cup without spilling hope. Emma wheels her bike to the pawn counter with both hands. Careful as a surgeon, the clerk asks if she wants to wait and offers a polite silence to fill. She shakes her head and says she will buy it back soon, a brave lie that hopes to be true. She keeps the receipt, folds it into a square, folds it again, then knots it into her pocket so it will not wander. Outside, a boy she does not know blasts down the sidewalk on a different bike, cheeks lit with speed. Emma watches him vanish, and decides not to cry because Max has been watching her face, and bravery tastes better than salt. Hunger rewrites the calendar. Clara slices a banana into thin coins and fans them across a single piece of bread, so the plate looks busy. James pretends he is full and pockets his portion, then passes the napkin to Max when Emma isn't looking. Max nudges it back toward the girl with his nose, insistent, as if reverse begging could feed them both. When the jug runs low, the dog refuses his bowl and licks Emma's wrist instead. Convinced devotion can carry water, she whispers that he needs strength to guard them. He sighs, and obedience wins, but only after a gaze that scolds starvation itself. Days find a rhythm made of refusal and resolve. Emma washes her hair in the park bathroom fast and quiet, counting to 30 with clenched teeth so she will not shiver. She keeps her school shirt neat by folding it under a blanket overnight to press the wrinkles flat. The counselor notices how she rubs an invisible dog under the desk and slides fruit into her backpack without speaking. At lunch she divides it into thirds, 2 for home, 1 for after school. She loops behind the diner, asks softly about leftover toast, and uses her thank yous like currency that never runs out. Chemo days turn the car into a waiting room. Clara reads forms until letters blur. Emma colors spaces too gently for markers that want to shout. Max anchors himself beside the open door, ears tuned to footfalls. When James returns, gray around the edges, they tuck him into a nest of blankets and pretend the sedan is softer. On better afternoons, he teaches Emma how to change a headlight bulb, why fuses fail, and how patience beats a stubborn bolt. Each fact feels like a rung on a ladder toward later. The dog sits like a foreman and approves the repair with a single thump of its tail. Weather tests resolve like an examiner who dislikes the students. Rain nags first, then becomes a curtain. The interior fogs. They crack windows and share damp towels that never quite dry. When the wind finally drags the storm away, cold replaces it with tea. The night custodian from the diner leaves a thermos near their tire without looking up. Steam hisses from the spout like a hymn. Emma whispers thanks to the air and imagines it finding the cook who told him to help. She pours for James first, then Clara, then takes what remains with reverence. On Maple Street's edge, a tender network forms, stitched from scarcity. The family in the van offers an outlet on their surge protector when a generator runs. An older woman sleeping in a station wagon teaches Emma to knit using twine and 2 chopsticks, showing how loops become fabric and fabric becomes heat. A veteran with a stiff shoulder walks the lot at night and taps on windows if a stranger circles twice. Names are rare, respect is constant. People share when they can, and look away when dignity requires privacy. Clara scrubs dashboards at the self-serve wash for quarters and sometimes a sandwich. She gathers bottles for deposit and turns clinking into dinner. Once she spots Ronald Tate's SUV, gleaming under fresh wax. She ducks behind a vacuum post until he leaves. Tremor fades into fury, not because he might see her, but because polish cannot make him clean. That night she counts the day's coins and chooses which purchase will stretch farther. She calls the clinic again, fills another aid form, and copies documents until the copier coughs. Time bends. The sedan is a house, a porch, a refuge, and a cell. They track sunset by the sign's color shift from blush to deeper rose. Exhaust plumes write temporary messages on cold mornings that vanish before anyone can read them, yet their center holds. James rubs Clara's palm when cramp seize her fingers. Emma lifts the blanket higher when she thinks they are sleeping. Max positions himself so he can touch all 3 at once. Love is a stubborn engine. It sputters, coughs, catches, and keeps turning over. Hunger can thin bodies and homelessness can bruise pride, but neither can unmake what they are to one another. They stay together, and the night finally moves forward. Mist clings to Maple Street. When Emma decides to try, the neon of Joe's diner flickers. In the battered sedan, Clara sleeps upright. James lies under a blanket in the back, breath thin but even. Max blinks at Emma from her lap. "Be brave," she whispers, easing the door until it clicks. Max hops down and stays glued to her shin, leash looped twice around her wrist. Inside, warmth and noise wash over them. Coffee plates, the bell at the pass. Red booths glow under chrome. Emma stands by the register while Max sits without being told. Engines roll in, a hum swelling to controlled thunder. Through the glass, motorcycles arc into clean lines. The steel riders step off. Denim leather, a winged emblem. A tall man holds the door for his crew. "Morning, June," he says to the waitress. "Morning, Ethan," she answers. Ethan notices the girl before his helmet hits the chair. She walks toward him like going to the edge of a dock, aware of deep water and committed anyway. Max stays close, ribs showing beneath scruffy fur. "Sir," Emma says, voice steady because she used the night to sand it smooth. "Please take my puppy." Conversations falter. "We haven't eaten in 3 days. I can't let Max die because we're poor." Ethan crouches, hands visible. "I'm Ethan," he says. "What's your name?" "Emma." "And his?" "Max." He lets the dog sniff his glove. Max licks once and returns to guard duty. Ethan nods at the leash, frayed where small fingers have worried it clean. "Can I ask a couple of questions?" She nods. Mark, a rider with careful eyes, slides a pen to Ethan. Big Tom scans the street. Rhea brings water. The rest give the pair a circle of privacy. "Where are your parents?" Ethan asks. Emma points through the window. "In our car. My dad's sick from a long-term blood thing. My mom is making the world not fall apart." "How long in the car?" "A while." "Why here?" "People eat here. People who eat can help." June arrives with a small bowl she claims is for the kitchen cat. She places it by Max's paws and walks away. Max waits for Emma's nod before taking careful bites, then pushes the bowl toward her with his nose. "What made you come to us?" he asks. "You look like you keep promises," she says. Something flickers in his face. He gestures to a chair. "Sit. No one is taking Max without making sure you're safe." "Deal?" "Deal," she says. Max settles on her shoe. "Did someone tell you to leave your apartment?" Ethan asks. "Letters did," she says. "Then a man changed a lock and called it a mistake we should thank him for." "Name?" "Ronald." "Your dad's boss?" "Victor. He said bad performance, like the sickness was laziness." Mark writes the names and underlines them. Big Tom's phone is out. He is already checking records. Rhea kneels. "Would you show me your car? We can bring your parents inside if they feel up to it." Emma looks to Ethan. He nods. "She's family," he says. Emma stands, Max rising with her. In the lot, Rhea keeps pace with the steps. Clara wakes fast, apology ready, then reads Rhea and sets it aside. James sits up, cap in his lap. "Your girl is steel," Rhea says. "We have people inside who can help. No strings." Clara studies her and decides. "Come in," she says. "We'll follow." At the window, Ethan turns to his crew. "Victor Hensley." Mark murmurs, scanning a database. "Terminations up. Same attorney as Tate's evictions. Ronald Tate filed 40% hikes with no permits." Big Tom adds, "Shell LLCs." Ethan nods. "We start now." He crosses to the sedan with Mark and Big Tom a step behind. He stops a few feet away. "Morning," he says. "I'm Ethan. Emma asked me for a promise. I intend to keep it." Clara's shoulders drop. James offers a tired smile. "We don't want to be a project," he said. "We want our kid and her dog to eat." "Then let us begin with that," Ethan replies. "Breakfast first. Then we map the fight." Inside, June clears a back booth. Rhea guides the family to seats and sets water down. Z, the youngest rider, slips out and returns with blankets and a bag of dog food. Ethan keeps his eyes on Clara. "We have a lawyer," he says, nodding to Mark. "We have an IT bloodhound," nodding to Big Tom. "We know a reporter who won't bend this story. We'll file emergency requests and get you a room tonight if you'll let us." Clara looks at James, then at Emma, then at Max under the table with one paw on Emma's shoe. "Yes," she says. James adds, "Yes," like a man passing a wrench he trusts. Mark asks for the letter. Clara lays out the stack. Termination, rent hike, inspection slips, shut-off threats, appeals, and photos of locks with dates. Mark photographs each page and returns them. Big Tom names files and starts a log so the record will hold in any office that matters. Ethan lowers his voice. We'll put food in your hands now and a plan under your feet by night. If anyone tries to frighten you, they meet us. Clara inhales as if her lungs remember a larger size. James touches Emma's sleeve. Hear that? A plan, he says. Emma nods and slips a crumb to Matt's. June brings boxed breakfasts and sets them down. Family discount, she says. The first bites make James close his eyes. Clara eats with her head bowed. Emma feeds Max second and herself last, until Ethan slides half his toast onto her plate and waits. Rhea takes Emma to the counter to pick fruit for later. Z kneels to scratch Max. Big Tom prints a list of agencies and deadlines. Mark phones a housing lawyer and leaves a message. Termination tied to illness. Coordinated rent pressure. Cousins. Pat. When they return, Ethan waits for a pocket of quiet and speaks in a tone that carries two tables. If you believe no child should choose between love and survival, hit like to support Emma's courage. A trucker at the counter nods and pays for coffees. Two regulars slide bills under the sugar caddy. Clara reaches for Emma's hand. Whatever happens next, she says, we walk it together. Ethan answers, you won't walk it alone. Outside, the mist lit. The bikes wait in a patient row. Engines quiet as held breath. Calls go out. Mark's timeline is building. Big Tom's map is webbing. Rhea is reserving a room. Emma presses her sneaker into Max's side, and he leans harder. Ethan stands only when everything necessary is moved. He offers his card to Clara. It lists no title, just a name and a number. We ride at noon, he says. We don't scare, and we don't bluff. Eat now, then we'll get your life back. We stand together, on Maple Street, the neon steady. In the corner booth, a child who arrived ready to surrender her dog, watches strangers turn into allies, and hope begins to feel like something with weight. Mist clings to Maple Street when Emma decides to try. The neon of Joe's diner flickers. In the battered sedan, Clara sleeps upright. James lies under a blanket, in the back, breath thin, but even. Max blinks at Emma from her lap. Be brave, she whispers, easing the door until it clicks. Max hops down and stays glued to her shin, leash looped twice around her wrist. Inside, warmth and noise wash over them. Coffee, plates, the bell at the pass. Red booths glow under chrome. Emma stands by the register while Max sits without being told. Engines roll in. A hum, swelling to controlled thunder. Through the glass, motorcycles arc into clean lines. The steel riders step off. Denim, leather, a winged emblem. A tall man holds the door for his crew. Morning, June, he says to the waitress. Morning, Ethan, she answers. Ethan notices the girl, before his helmet hits the chair. She walks toward him like going to the edge of a dock, aware of deep water and committed anyway. Max stays close, ribs showing beneath scruffy fur. Sir, Emma says, voice steady, because she used the night to sand it smooth. Please take my puppy. Conversations falter. We haven't eaten in 3 days. I can't let Max die because we're poor. Ethan crouches, hands visible. I'm Ethan, he says. What's your name? Emma. And his. Max. He lets the dog sniff his glove. Max licks once and returns to guard duty. Ethan nods at the leash, frayed where small fingers have worried it clean. Can I ask a couple of questions? She nods. Mark, a writer with careful eyes, slides a pen to Ethan. Big Tom scans the street. Rhea brings water. The rest give the pair a circle of privacy. Where are your parents? Ethan asks. Emma points through the window. In our car. My dad's sick from a long-term blood thing. My mom is making the world not fall apart. How long in the car? A while. Why here? People eat here. People who eat can help. June arrives with a small bowl she claims is for the kitchen cat. She places it by Max's paws and walks away. Max waits for Emma's nod before taking careful bites, then pushes the bowl toward her with his nose. What made you come to us? He asks. You look like you keep promises, she says. Something flickers in his face. He gestures to a chair. Sit. No one is taking Max without making sure you're safe. Deal? Deal, she says. Max settles on her shoe. Did someone tell you to leave your apartment? Ethan asks. Letters did, she says. Then a man changed a lock and called it a mistake we should thank him for. Name? Ronald, your dad's boss? Victor, he said bad performance, like the sickness was laziness. Mark writes the names, and underlines them. Big Tom's phone is out, he is already checking records. Rhea kneels. Would you show me your car? We can bring your parents inside if they feel up to it. Emma looks to Ethan. He nods. She's family, he says. Emma stands, Max rising with her. In the lot, Rhea keeps pace with the steps. Clara wakes fast, apology ready, then reads Rhea, and sets it aside. James sits up, cap in his lap. Your girl is steel, Rhea says. We have people inside who can help. No strings. Clara studies her and decides. Come in, she said. We'll follow. At the window, Ethan turns to his crew. Victor Hensley, Mark murmurs, scanning a database. Terminations up. Same attorney as Tate's evictions. Ronald Tate filed 40% hikes with no permits. Big Tom adds. Shell LLCs. Ethan nods. We start now. He crosses to the sedan with Mark and Big Tom a step behind. He stops a few feet away. Morning, he says. I'm Ethan. Emma asked me for a promise. I intend to keep it. Clara's shoulders drop. James offers a tired smile. We don't want to be a project, he said. We want our kid and her dog to eat. Then let us begin with that, Ethan replies. Breakfast first, then we map the fight. Inside, June clears a back booth. Rhea guides the family to seats and sets water down. Z, the youngest rider, slips out and returns with blankets and a bag of dog food. Ethan keeps his eyes on Clara. We have a lawyer, he says, nodding to Mark. We have an IT bloodhound, nodding to Big Tom. We know a reporter who won't bend this story. We'll file emergency requests and get you a room tonight if you'll let us. Clara looks at James, then at Emma, then at Max under the table with one paw on Emma's shoe. Yes, she says. James adds, yes, like a man passing a wrench he trusts. Mark asks for the letter. Clara lays out the stack. Termination, rent hike, inspection slips, shut-off threats, appeals, and photos of locks with dates. Mark photographs each page and returns them. Big Tom names files and starts a log so the record will hold in any office that matters. Ethan lowers his voice. We'll put food in your hands now, and a plan under your feet by night. If anyone tries to frighten you, they meet us. Clara inhales as if her lungs remember a larger size. James touches Emma's sleeve. Hear that? A plan, he says. Emma nods and slips a crumb to Max. June brings boxed breakfasts and sets them down. Family discount, she says. The first bites make James close his eyes. Clara eats with her head bowed. Emma feeds Max second, and herself last, until Ethan slides half his toast onto her plate and waits. Rhea takes Emma to the counter to pick fruit for later. Z kneels to scratch Max. Big Tom prints a list of agencies and deadlines. Mark phones a housing lawyer and leaves a message. Termination tied to illness. Coordinated rent pressure. Cousins. Pat. When they return, Ethan waits for a pocket of quiet and speaks in a tone that carries two tables. If you believe no child should choose between love and survival, hit like to support Emma's courage. A trucker at the counter nods and pays for coffees. Two regulars slide bills under the sugar caddy. Clara reaches for Emma's hand. Whatever happens next, she says, we walk it together. Ethan answers, you won't walk it alone. Outside, the mist lit. The bikes wait in a patient row. Engines quiet as held breath. Calls go out. Mark's timeline is building. Big Tom's map is webbing. Rhea is reserving a room. Emma presses her sneaker into Max's side, and he leans harder. Ethan stands only when everything necessary is moving. He offers his card to Clara. It lists no title, just a name and a number. We ride at noon, he says. We don't scare, and we don't bluff. Eat now, then we'll get your life back. We stand together. On Maple Street, the neon steady. In the corner booth, a child who arrived ready to surrender her dog watches strangers turn into allies, and hope begins to feel like something with weight. Engines gather at dawn. Ethan leads. Mark left. Big Tom right. Rhea and Z at the tail. The steel riders glide down Maple, pipe slow. Behind them come neighbors with folders, and Clara with Emma and Max. A van from local news bumps the curb. A second crew pulls in. Lisa Carter clips on a mic and nods. Ronald Tate's office, sits behind a clipped hedge. Glass so clear it tries to look innocent. Welcome home hangs above a door. Ethan Parks angles the bike toward the entry and sets a perimeter that leaves the walkway open. Rhea tapes a sheet to the glass. Public press conference, tenants' rights, no trespass. Big Tom unfolds a table, opens a rugged laptop, and positions a monitor. Lisa goes live. We're on Maple Street outside Tate Properties, where residents allege wrongful evictions and rent hikes without permits, connected to a scheme involving employment terminations. We will hear from former tenants and review documents gathered by advocates. The red light's steady. Ethan lifts a small bullhorn that carries without shouting. Ronald Tate, you told our neighbors the market demanded sacrifice. We brought receipts that show something else. Mark raises a binder. 45 evictions with missing inspection logs. Claimed upgrades without permit. Surprise lock changes are called mistakes. Payments marked received then erased. Big Tom turns his monitor toward the lens. A woman steps forward, chin lifted. I came home from a shift and my lock was different. My son's inhaler was inside. We slept in the stairwell. A cook follows. My ceiling leaked for months. They fined me for the stain. An older man lifts a photo of a mailbox, stuffed the day after his wife's funeral. Voices braid and pull the door of silence off its hinges. Clara stands beside Lisa, keeping Emma close. My husband began chemo. Victor Hensley fired him for performance the week after an infusion. Ronald raised rent by 40% for upgrades that no one saw. I traced filings and found cousins sharing a lawyer, a timeline and victims. She lifts dated copy. Emma stands with Max between her shoes, the dog's head tilted toward voices turning pleas into plans. Big Tom clicks through a map of shell companies. Building A owned by Maple Holdings, managed by Tate Properties. Building B owned by Tate Investments, managed by Maple Holdings. Both bills are maintained by a contractor that shares a mailbox with this office. Here are the card charges for smoke detectors that never reached units. Here are permits marked incomplete while tenants were billed for improvements. He taps a list on the desk. And here are 45 cases from the last 18 months. Mark faces the camera as if a jury is already seated. By statute, increases beyond a threshold require documented upgrades with permits. None. Coordinated action between an employer and a landlord to force the surrender of housing is civil conspiracy. Firing tied to medical treatment violates law and policy. We are filing for injunctive relief, damages and a criminal complaint for falsified notices. He hands Lisa a packet. The blinds tilt once. Ronald appears with a rehearsed smile. This is private property, he calls. Ethan gestures to the open lane and the posted paper. We leave room for truth to come and go. Ronald clocks the cameras and recalculate. If you had scheduled a meeting, Mark lifts a page. Friday at 3. You scheduled a lock change for Unit 4C while the tenant was at dialysis. Explain that on air. The crowd goes still. A black sedan noses to the curb 2 doors down. Victor Hensley steps out, straightens his tie, pockets the phone, and heads for the door like a calendar error. He can scold away. Lisa meets him halfway. Mr. Hensley, did you coordinate with Tate Properties to pressure employees with medical conditions into surrendering apartments? He puts on corporate calm. We review attendance company-wide. Housing is irrelevant. Lisa holds up HR notes listing rent delinquency beside sick leave totals. Irrelevant, she asks. Then why are these columns on the same page? Ethan lowers the bullhorn and simply speaks. You counted a sick father as an acceptable loss in a real estate plan. Former tenants form a line at the hedge. A teacher holds receipts stamped paid that turned into arrears overnight. A mother shows a photo of a smoke alarm without batteries beside a fine for disabling equipment she never had. A veteran shows a notice for an unauthorized pet that refers to his granddaughter's fish tank. Each story bolts another plank under the truth. Ronald tries to end the scene with a shrug. We follow policy. Clara answers. You write policy to make theft look tidy. She turns a page. Here is the date you cashed my rent. Here is the date you posted a late notice anyway. Victor angles toward James with a tone that once worked in rooms without cameras. If we discuss accommodations, James meets his eyes. I needed time to survive medicine, that fights for my life. You measured me in hours and called the curve failure. He doesn't raise his voice. He removes it from apology. Rhea climbs the steps, opens a slim case, and sets a portable printer on the rail. Draft restraining orders, she says. Mark fills names: Clara and James, the mother with asthma, the veteran, and the cook. Big Tom timestamps copies as they slide out. Lisa's lens lingers on the fresh ink like a flag. Ethan focuses on the moment. You can argue while the city watches, or you can sit at that table with our attorney and a reporter. Either way, the record stands. Ronald hesitates, then edges inside with the door propped. Victor follows, smaller than his suit for the first time. At the threshold, Emma steps half forward. "Sir," she says to Ethan, eyes on the office. "Does this mean Max can stay with us forever?" Ethan's face softens. "That's the road we're paving," he says. Max noses her knee, as if he understood the contract just made. Phones lift like lanterns. Comments stack on Lisa's feed. A trucker who ate at Joe's yesterday honks in rhythm with the Harley. Mark collects signatures of receipt from Ronald's hand. The pen leaves a tremor that the camera records. Big Tom emails the packet to the city attorney, the state housing authority, and a paper across town, then posts a public cache. Ethan turns back to the crowd. "If you stand against greed, subscribe to expose more stories like Emma's." The line lands as a door to push together for our whole town. Hands move. Donations ping the mutual aid fund. Rhea linked. Clara squeezes Emma's fingers. James exhales like a man returning from deep water. The engines start, not to intimidate, but to mark a break. Metal hums. Cameras keep rolling. Ronald stares at the forms. Victor watches his name crawl across a chyron he cannot edit. The street holds. Ethan powers down the bullhorn and rests a palm on his tank. "We'll be back with officers, lawyers and neighbors until enforcement arrives," he says. Nobody falls through. Clara leans against James. Emma rubs Max's ear, and the dog settles belly down, satisfied by the sound that replaces fear. A crowd repeating that home is not a trick of paperwork, but a right enforced in daylight. Together. A week after the confrontation, Maple Street woke to sirens that sounded like relief. Officers entered Tate properties with warrants listing dates, transfers, and sworn statements. Ronald Tate tried his ribbon-cutting smile. It failed. When cuffs clicked and a detective read counts for fraud, conspiracy, falsified notices, and retaliation tied to medical leave. Minutes later, Victor Hensley stepped from a sedan, with his phone still warm and corporate calm loaded in his throat. Cameras didn't blink. Both men were arrested where they had planned other people's ruin, and the street, which had memorized each family's fear, finally exhaled. Justice advanced in files and footsteps, not fireworks. Mark gathered affidavits from tenants, nurses, and floor supervisors. The testimonies stitched into a spine that would not bend. Big Tom turned databases into a map. Even skeptics could follow, tracing shells, deposits, and permits that never existed. Ethan stood beside Clara at every hearing, patient as a metronome, steady enough to lend time when the waiting tried to swallow breath. Rhea ran rides, meals, blankets, and childcare, so no one missed a date. Z managed donations with receipts clean enough to show on air. Lisa Carter covered each step with care, lifting facts without turning people into props. When prosecutors added new charges based on fresh complaints, the neighbors outside the courthouse cheered softly, like people learning to trust sound again. A judge froze the cousins' accounts and appointed a special master to trace funds through companies with pleasant names and ugly purposes. The ledgers revealed a blunt design: rent hikes without permits, midnight lock changes, synchronized terminations, invented fees, and a tidy column for loss mitigation that meant evict faster, deny quicker, forget slower. The court created a settlement fund to repair harm quickly and publicly. First came emergency grants for housing, food, and medicine. Next came structured payments to reimburse provable loss. Finally, the order funded oversight, so the machinery that failed would answer to the people it served. That afternoon, the riders helped Emma's family carry 2 boxes and a stubborn kettle up one flight above a hardware store. The apartment was small, honest, and bright. 2 windows, a steady stove, and a sink that didn't cough. Ethan tightened a loose latch, Mark unfolded towels and stacked bowls. Big Tom coaxed a temperamental outlet into obedience and labeled breakers like a librarian. Z left soap, rice, tea and a note with 3 phone numbers. Clara turned the tap and watched clear water run like a benediction. She had earned the hard way. James stood in a sunstripe, hands open, and let joy arrive without apology. Max leapt onto a second-hand sofa, spun twice, and settled with a sigh that sounded like home. Remembering their names. Good news followed shelter the way warmth follows flame. The oncologist wrote that James's leukemia had responded to a revised regimen funded through emergency aid. Later scans confirmed remission. Celebration came quietly. Coffee finished while hot, showers without rush, a nap that felt like returning instead of surrender. Clara hugged him until the past loosened. Emma baked a boxed cake, spread too much icing, and gave Max the first bite. He accepted with solemn dignity, then pranced in a circle, small paws drumming a dance that belonged to the saved. Work returned without dread. Ethan asked Clara to manage the garage after watching her turn chaos into order while keeping dignity intact. She unlocked the bay before dawn, swept a clean stripe across concrete, and posted a schedule balanced by skill and fairness. Customers felt the difference in the way phones were answered and promises kept. Deliveries landed on time, because Clara's lists did not drift. The crew learned that precision can feel like kindness when it prevents panic rather than punishes mistake. At noon, Ethan leaned on a fender and said the shop finally sounded like itself. Clara answered that people do too when pressure stops masquerading as policy. Emma started at a school that smelled of pencils and wax. A counselor introduced a friend, who loved animals and knew the shelter's walking hours. On Thursdays they cleaned bowls and leashes. On Saturdays they coached shy dogs into trust. Teachers noticed Emma's patience and invited her to lead a project on help. She interviewed a nurse, a mechanic and a reporter, then presented a poster where hands, not titles, told the story. Her voice didn't shake. Afterward she walked Max past the river, counting ducks and naming boats, measuring a future by ripples instead of threat. The settlement fund did more than refill wallets. It rebuilt confidence block by block. 45 families signed new leases, with protections written in plain language. Inspectors posted permits where everyone could see them. A hotline routed callers to people, not recording. The veteran with his granddaughter's fish moved into a quiet building near a park. The mother who once slept in a stairwell chaired a tenant council that met at the library under a banner reading "You Belong Here." June from the diner delivered coffee and pies to those meetings, and wrote down what broke so the list of repairs would not be erased by convenience. Lisa's coverage reached farther than anyone expected. A university sent interns to help with forms. Churches and shops contributed to a mutual aid pool that no longer required shame at the counter. Nurses trained volunteers to document leave so patients could focus on healing. Big Tom taught a free class at the library on backups, passwords, and scanning records, using jokes to make hard lessons stick. Mark mentored a young legal aid attorney who had grown up 3 blocks away and returned ready to fight with calm. Rhea coordinated a small network of rooms for families between leases, so no one had to choose between rent and medicine again. Days settled into the good ordinary. James walked Max along the river path while Emma counted ducks. Sometimes he let her set the pace, and learned that recovery was not a race you win, but a road you share. Clara called out part numbers over the hum of impact wrenches and finished each shift by wiping her own name from the whiteboard, like a coach who had nothing to prove. Ethan tuned a stubborn carburetor, then spoke at a council session, where policy wore faces and rules remembered their reasons. Z built a simple site listing clinics, food banks and shops that offered grace when paychecks staggered. The page's first comment read, "We see you," and that felt like more than design. On a Saturday in late spring, the community center opened for a celebration of all 45 families. Tables held casseroles labeled in marker, recipes handed down like faith. A banner read, "We're still here," in letters painted by teenagers who now understood exactly what staying costs and why it mattered. People brought framed photos of their hardest nights and stood beside them smiling, proof that memory can be ballast rather than anchor. Ethan thanked the room for teaching a riding club how to be thunder that sheltered. Clara spoke next, voice steady as a torque wrench, explaining how neighbors turned evidence into remedy and noise into law. Lisa filmed, but the moment didn't need a lens to be real. Emma stepped up with Max in a small vest stitched with steel riders. She said she once believed survival meant giving away someone you loved, then learned that real help makes room for everyone you are. Applause rose like warm air. Max barked once, accepted a biscuit, and resumed supervising Joy. James let tears fall without shame. Remission sounded different in a bright room full of witnesses who understood the cost and refused to look away when looking away would have been easier. Outside, Maple Street breathed easier. The diner's neon glowed steadily. The hardware store's bell chimed more often. Buses kept better time because drivers were learning the names of passengers who no longer slept in cars. Clara locked the garage and told Ethan the place hummed like a song she had known all along. He laughed and said souls are just systems with better oil. She shrugged and added that engines like people last longer when maintenance is attention, instead of an excuse. Night returned gently. James tucked Emma in and promised waffles at sunrise. She asked whether Max could have the first bite. He said that was the law of this house. Down the hall, Clara set a simple band on the windowsill beside a dish of spare screws. It wasn't the original ring, which had bought them time when time was expensive, but it shone with the same vow: we endure, then we build. Before sleep, Emma whispered the line she had saved for a day when fear no longer made the rules. Comment: hope wins. If this restored your faith in justice. She didn't need a camera to make it matter. Somewhere a phone chimed. Somewhere a bell above a shop door rang. Somewhere a pen signed a lease that would not become a weapon. In the quiet that followed, Max sprawled on his back, paws bicycling through dreams. James breathed deep, body relearning ease. Clara slept with one hand extended toward them both, as if completing a circuit. Maple Street, which had watched their fight frame by frame, exhaled at last. Triumph didn't roar, it hummed. The dependable music of a garage opening early, a diner closing late, and neighbors choosing fairness, until choosing fairness felt like a habit. Morning would demand effort, finally would build instead of bruise, and that was victory enough to carry into the sun. The Steel Riders Clubhouse smells like cedar, motor oil, and vanilla cake. Sunlight slides through the high windows and washes banners, stitched by neighbors who learned that paper shields tear, but people linked by purpose do not. Emma arrives with a ribbon the color of morning sky, hair braided by Clara at dawn, cheeks bright with anticipation. Max trots beside her in a tiny vest, the patch sewn by Z with careful hands. Steel Rider's friend. He sits, lifts a paw, and accepts a solemn scratch from Ethan, who bows like this is court and she is the judge. 8 looks good on you, he says, tapping a paper crown onto her head. James pretends to be shocked by how quickly candles multiply, and winks at his daughter like a conspirator, stealing time back from fear. Clara sets a tray of lemonade on a workbench polished for the party, and whispers thanks to a room that became shelter when everything else tried to fold. Neighbors gather with soft noise and steady presence. June arrives, balancing pies still warm. The veteran brings a jar, where dollars fold like birds, and writes community fund in thick marker before placing it beside a guest book. The teacher Emma admires carries cards from classmates who drew dogs and goggles on the illoves. Lisa tucks a small tripod near the cake, not to chase breaking news, only to record joy offered without spectacle. Mark lays out plates while Big Tom threads a string of lights between rafters. The glow makes chrome wink like stars. Rhea pins a schedule to the corkboard: clinic rides, grocery runs, document help, and hands out pens that somehow always return to her pocket. The candles flare. Emma studies flames and sees proof instead of danger. Breath can be stronger than darkness. She draws air, makes one wish and blows. Smoke curls upward and disappears into beams that once echoed wrenches and now keep songs. Applause rolls across concrete like friendly thunder. Max barks once and receives a crumb from Ethan for perfect timing. Clara slices the first piece for James, who says it's perfect before tasting because sometimes joy needs affirmation more than evidence. The second piece goes to Emma, the third to Max and the tiniest ceremonial morsel, and the fourth to the veteran who guarded the lot on nights when worry tried to act like weather. Gifts are simple and exact: a notebook shaped like a house with lined rooms for ideas, colored pencils named after things that last: oak, brick, river, bread, a leash braided from paracord, dyed moss and coal so it won't show mud after adventures, a library card in Emma's name, the photo capturing freckled concentration in a tilt of happiness that might tip the world. The honorary patch goes to Max, who squares his shoulders as if accepting rank. He hops onto a bench beside Emma, watches the room with a small general seriousness, then flops in a sprawl that says love outranks ceremony. Ethan raises a glass of seltzer. 12 quiet seconds, he says, and the room obliges. 45 families live on the other side of a wall we pushed down together. Tonight we celebrate one birthday, and also the ordinary miracles. Rent that matches a lease, medicine delivered on schedule, locks that don't change at night, phones that connect to humans, work that feeds pride. Everyday life is a cathedral when it was stolen and returned. The clapping that follows carries memory rather than noise. People nod at one another like witnesses signing a shared page. Clara thanks the writers for widening the meaning of repair. We fix engines and calendars, she says, but mostly we fix panic by refusing to be late for one another. That's management worth waking up for. James adds a truth learned the long way. I once measured days by what hurt. Now I count by what we build. Emma speaks last, neither shy nor showy, just clear. Max kept us brave, she says, hand on his neck. You kept Max with us. I'm 8 because you didn't look away. The sentence lands like a key turning. Somewhere in the back, June wipes at her eyes with a napkin and calls it steam. After the cake, the party becomes work in the best sense. Rhea posts sign-ups. The board fills faster than frosting disappears. Lisa records short clips of neighbors describing what changed and whom they called when a letter arrived. The veteran demonstrates a crank flashlight, a small ritual against future storms. Big Tom shows kids how to back up a phone and print records, turning privacy into protection without scaring anyone. Mark explains rights in calm sentences that sound like solid stare. Z sorts donated school supplies into neat stacks because tomorrow keeps showing up and deserves order. Emma spends a while writing thank you notes in the house-shaped notebook, spelling slowly and drawing small dogs chasing stars in the corners. She saves one for the judge, another for a nurse who taught her to braid gauze like ribbon, and one for the bus driver who waved her aboard on soaked mornings. The longest message is for Ethan. Thank you for hearing a girl carrying fear in a loop of leash, and answering with a promise that fed everyone tied to that knot. Max leans against her shin while she writes, eyes half closed, tail tapping the floor like punctuation. As the sun angles west, the lot outside fills with a different kind of ride. Bicycles sparkle, scooters skip, strollers hum across asphalt that smells faintly of summer, because warmth is not only weather. Kids weave between parked Harleys with bells that ping a cheerful code. Emma stands near the door, Max vigilant and happy, greeting each friend with the serious joy children bring to ritual. A fine rain begins, more blessing than nuisance. Someone tosses a tarp over the grill, and laughter outruns the drizzle. The air tastes like cinnamon, gasoline and relief. Ethan leans with James at the threshold while engines gleam like horses asleep in a field. She'll run this town one day, Ethan says, nodding toward Emma. James answers, only if she wants that road, and both men smile at the reality that choice belongs to them now. Clara catches Lisa's eye, and they share a look that blends report and relief, both knowing stories change cities when they shine light without heat. The moment feels like a hinge, the past still visible, the next page turning with care. Before dusk, the riders roll for a slow lap around the block, not a parade, just a promise loop. Emma sits on a low bench with a blanket around her knees, Max's chin on her thigh, and watches her unlikely constellation of guardians move as one. Pipes thrum a lullaby that assures instead of threatens. Porch lights wink on. Drivers pause without pressing the horns. When the bikes return and the doors swing open again, music finds a tempo both old and new, a rhythm like gratitude learning to dance. Someone starts a clap that turns into steps. Emma tries, misses a beat, tries again and gets it right. Night gathers gently. The last dishes are stacked. The jar grows heavy. A calendar near the door lists shop hours, clinic schedules, council meetings, and a bold line, know your rights night, every Thursday. Clara locks the signboard in place and pockets the key with a private smile. James clips Max's leash and hands it to Emma, a ceremonial gesture that says the road ahead is long and livable. Ethan shrugs into his jacket and scans the room one more time, counting people the way mechanics count bolts, knowing each one keeps something important together. Now a word for everyone who stayed through each chapter, who felt outrage, who typed encouragement, who sent a sandwich, who showed up at dawn. This ending belongs to you too, because endings like this are built, not bestowed. Keep going, notice your streets, learn a policy, bake an extra loaf, offer rides, photograph notices, read the fine print, teach a neighbor where to call, carry a spare charger, save receipts, write things down, tell someone's story as if their home were your own, hold meetings, share checklists, keep copies, ask better questions, invite calm, refuse cruelty, believe witnesses, fund the ordinary, protect the quiet, celebrate small wins, return phone calls, show up twice. Max hops onto Emma's lap, heavy in the pleasant way that says trust. She kisses his head and looks into the camera. Lisa sits near the cake. Thank you, she says steady and soft, for helping my family make a beginning that doesn't end. The room holds that sentence like a promise we can keep again tomorrow. Then sound returns. Chairs scraping, laughter rising, boots crossing concrete, paws tapping eager pattern. Ordinary life, finally, doing what it does best, continuing with kindness and a plan. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more stories of heroes like Ethan. What happens next will shock you. Stay tuned.